Our next speaker is attorney Meng Che. Meng joined us in 2021. He's a graduate of Seattle U Law School and also the University of Washington LLM program in tax. Prior to law school, Meng worked in technology, variety of roles and capacities, and so he brings that expertise and experience with him. And Meng is going to be talking to us today about probate assets, non-probate assets, and how planning works around those types of assets. So Meng.
Thank you very much, Mike. Good morning, everyone. I'm attorney Meng Che, and my practice area, as Mike referred, includes estate planning and probate. Now, this has given me the unique perspective on many types of different probate assets, what usually pass pretty quickly versus ones that are a little more complex and may require a little bit more help and forethought. And today I'll be sharing some general information about potentially problematic probate assets that may require that additional forethought when completing an estate plan, and share some general tips and recommendations for planning opportunities. Now, what many clients are not aware of, unless they have administered a probate themselves, is that a significant amount of time in probates can be spent during the inventory and distribution phases of a probate. Now, an inventory is actually required under Washington statute, specifically RCW 11.44.015, which is currently on screen right now. And this is one of the things that is really surprising to most people, is that within 3 months after appointment, a probate administrator, personal representative, or executor for an estate is required to make a true inventory and appraisement of all the property of the estate, including a list of all liabilities, encumbrances, liens that are owed by the estate. And everything must be valued as of the date of death of the decedent. And now, for most traditional and common assets, completing an inventory and subsequent distributions of the assets is usually not an issue. However, when non-traditional or uncommon assets are part of an estate, additional time, energy, and costs may be incurred by the personal representative to complete the inventory not only on time, but then further down the road to actually distribute those assets to the necessary estate beneficiaries as well. Now, here are some examples of potentially problematic probate assets that we've witnessed in the, at least I witnessed in the past several years. The first category here is non-readily identifiable property. And the gist here is pretty straightforward. If it's not easily seen or known about, usually these types of assets can be missed. So the first item on example here is Bitcoins, altcoins, or other types of electronic currency, which have really come into the foreground in the past several years, especially with the adoption of blockchain technologies and the proliferation of all these different types of coins and NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Everyone's just been jumping on the bandwagon, it seems. However, because of the fact that they're non-tangible, it's not as easy to determine where that these assets currently reside, how much they are, and who actually owns them, unless you actually have the information available. Next are precious metals. This would include bullion or certificates of exchange, metal coins such as gold coins or silver coins. And again, a lot of these, because of the nature of the asset, just may not be physically available or even known to most estate administrators. Next is intangible property, which is one of the largest categories here, and similarly to electronic currencies, in recent years has increased dramatically beyond the standard areas that have been considered intangible property, which are typically copyrights, trademarks, closely held business interests and stock options, to now include internet assets, which we're seeing now, such as domain names, social media accounts. If anyone's come across social media influencers, a lot of their accounts are now worth considerable amounts of money, not only on different platforms such as Facebook, but YouTube, as well as Instagram. And so how do you sit there and track these things and know about them if you're not someone who's following these individuals or know about these particular assets? And then last are collectibles. These can include rare books, expensive jewelry or costume jewelry, fine art, trains, or other types of memorabilia, which, if they're not readily known by individuals who may be going through a person's estate, how are people to know that a specific rare book is actually worth thousands of dollars in someone's library compared to another book sitting right next to it that may be only worth, $5 or $10? And then also are if any of these collectibles are actually contained in a secure storage facility, such as a storage locker or other temperature controlled location. Do people actually share that information as to the location and where these items are actually located? Next is foreign property. This is one of the things that we are seeing so much more of recently and has become more prevalent, especially with the increase in remote work opportunities that allow people to now work in far away areas. And this has allowed them to now start to look around and potentially purchase real properties, such as timeshares, condos, houses in far-flung locations, and then even potentially renting them out as Airbnb locations and obtaining profit there as they continue to live this digital nomadic lifestyle, as well as business interests. So sometimes people may want to sit there and purchase a pub or a restaurant or other types of mineral or interests in other locations. And so again, because these are located in far-flung locations, it's very tough to sit there and know about them, especially if someone's trying to administer a estate, not let alone if they value these types of assets, especially if there's complicating factors such as a different native tongue is being spoken in those locations. And last is restricted property, which usually relates to property or assets that have specific government regulations that apply to their purchase, sale, and ownership. The most common example being firearms that have purchase, transfer, restriction, and requirements, but also this includes other types of items that may not be something that is thought of, such as endangered species animal products, or other contraband products such as controlled substances, which require special licenses or fees to be paid. Now, after reviewing those examples, one of the ways that we go about viewing the inventory and subsequent distribution process is looking at it through the lens of a third party. And that's something that I was hoping that was coming through here, is like always thinking about it from the perspective of a third party who's going to come in and actually have to now inventory all those assets and value them. And so if they're unfamiliar with a person's assets, it's actually a lot easier then to identify potential problematic assets, usually by first asking the question of if there's any special knowledge or resources that may be required to identify and access any particular property. For example, does a personal representative know the location, have the proper access to the asset? A great example here is a safe deposit box located in a specific bank that is a specific branch location and may have a specific access control list as to who can actually access it, and may require a key to access as well. If not, then that may be a significant pain point that needs to be addressed through planning. Now, this is especially important if dealing with electronic currencies that may have their associated wallet, which is how most electronic currencies, Bitcoins as an example here, are associated in the blockchain is with a specific wallet. If that wallet is not contained on an exchange, i.e. a third-party platform, and instead someone has decided to maintain that storage wallet on a computer or other storage device and potentially secured that with some sort of authentication mechanism. If that is not readily available or even accessible to someone who is administering a state, that could definitely cause issues because the asset could then be overlooked or may be considered a total loss. Also, special jurisdictional requirements can be an issue. For example, if a person passes away with real property holdings in a foreign country, there may be a specific transfer process for that jurisdiction and asset type. A relatively recent example that we've come across has been how different jurisdictions treat timeshare interests. One country it may treat the timeshare interest as expiring upon the death of an individual, whereas another country and or local state may sit there and treat those timeshare interests as real property interests that then require to have a ancillary probate in that particular jurisdiction to be started to transfer that timeshare interest. So again, these are the types of questions that can arise based upon different locations, different types of assets. And here it was a great example of same asset, but different jurisdictions and rules. Next is ease evaluation as of date of death. And if there's any assets that have very specialized appraisals or marketplaces, are there specific appraisers or standard valuation processes that should be used? For example, for a classic car, usually most people try to use Kelley Blue Book or NADA to value vehicles in an estate. However, with classic cars, it may be more beneficial to establish fair market value as of date of death by going through a dealer who specializes in classic car sales. Similarly, documented provenance can be key to helping an expert establish authenticity and valuation quickly. Not only does this arise with fine art, but also with unique items such as covered animal species products that are considered endangered. Third, and often overlooked, are if specific maintenance requirements to maintain an asset, such as specialized insurance, professional custodians, or regular service and upkeep fees are required. Think of musical instruments that are antiques that need to have a specific temperature-controlled environment or be tuned on a regular basis. These identification processes lead to some common proactive planning recommendations. First is research and identify valuation and transfer methods, while people are living. Obtaining expert advice to facilitate contemplated transfers. For example, if someone owns a timeshare, next time they go visit, maybe potentially go talk to the timeshare office to ask them, hey, if I pass away, what happens to my timeshare interest? And kind of collecting information in that that path. Next is actually documenting that information down into something such as a summary of assets that include not only custodian, location, other identification information, as well as authorized individuals that may have access to that particular asset, as well as documenting security information that may be required, locations, passwords, as well as collecting documentation in a centralized location to establish provenance for a particular asset if that's something that's typical. And last is sharing this information with any fiduciaries that you nominate in your estate planning to make sure that they're aware of the location of this information and confirming that they can actually go access it if the need ever arises, as well as sharing any changes, because a lot of times with collectibles, people buy, sell, gift assets. And so you want to make sure that your documentation is being updated and that you're sharing these types of changes so people don't go on wild goose chases, trying to go locate assets that were originally they think still exist in your estate. And so as I come to the end of my presentation here, I really want to make sure that the key takeaway here is that with proactive planning, individuals can influence to a large degree how the inventory and distribution process occurs, even with complex assets in their estate. Now, this concludes my presentation, and I thank you all for listening.